Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CEDAW Convention Speaker Series being hosted by Equality Bahamas. I'm Alicia Wallace. I'm a part of the Equality Bahamas team, and I'm very excited about today's session, which is focused on Article 11 on employment. And we are very fortunate to have the Vice Chair of the CEDAW Committee with us today, guiding us through this particular article. And the flow will basically be, we'll have a presentation of about 30 to 40 minutes. And then after that, we'll have a little over 30 minutes for more discussion, where you can feel free to ask your questions, share comments and concerns. If you have any challenges, this is a very open space for us to have real dialogue about the convention and in particular, Article 11 on employment. Please note that this is a pro-woman, pro-LGBTQ+, pro-migrant, abilities and disabilities space. So we will not tolerate any form of misogyny, sexism, racism, ableism, hostility towards migrants or LGBTQI+ people. We have a no warning policy. So if any of that is displayed, it would be immediate booting from the room and no return. Having said that, I'm very excited to get into the session. We are very fortunate to have Marian Bethel, who is a member of the CEDAW committee, is the rapporteur, and she is a Bahamian attorney, and she has been helping us to coordinate this session. And of course, she knows the CEDAW committee members incredibly well. And Marian is going to welcome our speaker for today. Over to you, Marian.
Thank you. Well, good morning and greetings from the Bahamas. I know it's almost midnight in Japan, in Tokyo. So welcome to my dear friend Hiroko and her students, and also a special welcome to Dana, who is as an intern at the CEDAW committee, helping Hiroko with so many things and just so very helpful to all of us. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon, welcome. So it's my pleasure to introduce my dear friend Hiroko to this session. I'm so grateful that you've agreed to do this. And I just wanted to know about the cherry blossoms in Tokyo. Are they out for one? They're out? Oh gosh, they must be so gorgeous. Yes. Okay, well, Hiroko and I, we walk to the UN every morning together from the hotel. We have dinner together. We drink Japanese beer together and have Japanese food. And she's introduced me to all of these wonderful things. Plus, I get to know all about Japanese culture as we walk to the UN and back. And so Hiroko has been just really wonderful in sharing all of this good stuff with me about Japan and her family and history, etc. But on the committee itself, Hiroko is just one of the very key members of our committee. She's a vice chair of the CEDAW committee, and she has worked for quite a while on a group called Working Group on Working Methods, where she's been the chair and is now the vice chair. And this group in particular keeps us on point. Hiroko makes sure that we follow CEDAW procedure and protocols very closely under our convention and under our working methods. And she helps the committee to harmonize what we do with other treaty bodies at the UN. And so Hiroko has played a pivotal role there. She's also been on the communications group of the CEDAW committee, where she has had carriage of two very important cases, one on obstetric violence in Spain, and the other one on sexual relationships between women in Singapore, both of which were successfully adopted by the CEDAW committee and are now part of the jurisprudence and international human rights standards for the committee and other treaty bodies also. So Hiroko's work on the committee has been very significant, and she's now an expert on Article 11, and so that is why she's here doing this work with us. But I just want to also give her formal attributes. So she's a professor of international law at Asia University, and she's earned a PhD from International Christian University. She was a program officer at the United Nations Development Program and an associate professor at Kita-Kyushu City University and a visiting scholar at the School of International and Public Affairs, Columbia University, before assuming her current position as professor of international law. She's also written several articles, one called Legal Personality of a autonomous subsidiary organs of the United Nations, another one called Law and Justice in International Society, and another called Humane International Law for Peace, Liberty, and Prosperity. So Hiroko is a very accomplished academic, and she brings tremendous international law expertise to our CEDAW committee as we do our work. And so I want to just give Hiroko a big hug and a warm welcome from the Bahamas, and thank her so much for being here with us. Hiroko, thank you. It's over to you.
Thank you, Marion. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Good morning, everyone, and good evening from Tokyo. I'm Hiroko Akizuki, the member of the current CEDAW committee. I would like to congratulate the Bahamas for its the 30th anniversary of the Bahamas ratification of CEDAW Convention. And I would like to congratulate also Miss Alicia and Equality Bahama for organizing this very important CEDAW speaker series to increase awareness and understanding of the CEDAW Convention. It's my great honor to be here and to talk about Article 11. So just let me share my PowerPoint slides. Can you see it? Yes, thank you. Yes. As Marion said, it's a spring season in Japan, and the famous cherry blossoms is now full bloom. So I used some pictures of cherry blossoms on my PowerPoint slides. Thank you very much again. And then my special thanks goes to, as Marion said, to Ms. Dana Huseman, who kindly did a lot of work for me. And she also made some research on Article 11 for me to prepare this PowerPoint slides, my presentation. So let's start. Just a moment. Before I talk about Article 11, I would like to reiterate the characteristics of the CEDAW Convention. I'm sure you have learned quite a lot of things about the CEDAW Convention, but I would like to reiterate two things. The first, the CEDAW Convention is a universal convention with 189 state parties. There are some regional human rights regional human rights treaties, but universal treaties, which have most countries in the world, such as the CEDAW Convention, are, I think, more important than regional treaties. So please remind that CEDAW Convention is a universal convention. And secondly, the CEDAW Convention is a comprehensive convention. You may know that there are more than 10 international human rights treaties with regard different human rights issues, such as civil and political rights, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, or International Convention on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, or the International Convention on the Right of Child, and the other treaties of refugees and disabled persons, and so forth and so forth. But CEDAW Convention covers almost all of these human rights issues, as long as women and girls are concerned. Therefore, I think the CEDAW Convention is a comprehensive convention, and it's really the Bill of Rights for women. So if it's better for us to read all international human rights treaties if it's possible, but if you're working for only women and girls, I think it's enough for us to at least to read the CEDAW Convention carefully if you're serving for women and girls' rights. I would like to reiterate these 2 points. And also, whenever I talk about the CEDAW Convention, I always mention these 3 important points as follows. First, the CEDAW Convention aims not only legal equality, but rather aims at de facto or substantive equality between men and women. Now, I said men and women because the CEDAW Convention refers that word, men and women. But obviously, we are talking about the LGBTQI rights and so forth. So we usually call it the gender equality, but sometimes I call it equality between men and women if I talk about the CEDAW Convention. So please remind, I'm sorry for that, but I don't mean that I disregard the LGBTIQ people. Then the state parties usually explain, when we have the constructive dialogue with the state parties, they usually explain that there is no gender discrimination on the law. They are always focusing on the legal equality. But seldom the state party explains the real situation on the ground. I'm saying this because let me take one example of the situation in Japan. In Japan, the Japanese civil law says that a married couple freely choose either of husband's name or wife's name as their family name. Freely they can choose. So the legal, talking about the civil law, men and women are equal. But in reality, the figures showed that 95% of married couple chose husband's family name as their family name. So this fact clearly shows that in Japan, there is a deep-rooted patriarchal family system in Japan. So if we just applying equal civil law does not change the de facto discrimination in the reality. So that's why I'm saying the CEDAW Convention is aiming not only legal equality, but rather de facto equality is more important. I would like to stress this. And secondly, the CEDAW Convention aims to eliminate discrimination against women, not only by the state parties, but also by any person, organization, or enterprise. This point is very important, especially with regard to Article 11, because employment-related discrimination are usually done by private enterprises and or individuals. So international treaty, the CEDAW Convention itself legally bind the state parties, but the state party has the due diligence obligation to let private person and private company eliminate any kind of discrimination against women. This is especially important for the issue of employment. And thirdly, according to Article 4 of the Convention, I'm sure you have already learned about Article 4, adoption by state parties of temporary special measures aimed at accelerating de facto equality between men and women shall not be considered discrimination as defined in the CEDAW Convention. Therefore, the CEDAW Committee encouraged the state parties to proactively adopt temporary special measures in order to accelerate de facto equality between men and women. These are, I think, very important 3 points of the CEDAW Convention. Now let's move to the issue of the employment. According to the UN Women's report, global and current status of women in work are as follows. Women remain less likely to participate in the labor market than men around the world. Women are more likely to be unemployed than men. Women are overrepresented in informal and vulnerable employment. Globally, women are paid less than men. Women bear disproportionate responsibility for unpaid care and domestic work. Unpaid care work is essential to the functioning of the economy, but often goes uncounted and unrecognized. Women are still less likely to have access to social protection. Women are less likely than men to have access to financial institutions or have a bank account. And violence and harassment in the world of work affect women regardless of age, location, income, or social status. Now, let's look into the content of the Article 11. Article 11 deals with equality of women in the areas of employment. This article obliges state parties to the Convention to protect the right of women before, during, and in absence of employment. Before employment, a woman should be given equal opportunities for employment and free choice in which profession she wants to pursue. Your country or Japan is not in that situation, but many countries in Asia, Middle East, or Africa, women cannot have any opportunity to get employment, or in some countries, women has to get agreement of their husband to work. So the equal opportunities for employment and free choice of employment is very important before she entered into employment. And during employment, a woman should enjoy equal benefits and remuneration, including training, promotions, and salary. Moreover, she should enjoy a working environment that is safe and is no constraints on her health. And in the case of incapacity to work due to, for instance, sickness, retirement, or unemployment, women should have access to Social Security and paid leave. These are the content of the Section 1 of Article 11. Section 2 of Article 11 specifically prohibits discrimination on the basis of marital status or maternity, and obliges state parties to take measures to encourage the provision of the necessary supporting social service to enable parents to combine family obligations with work responsibilities and participation in public life, in particular through promoting the establishment and development of network of child care facilities. And lastly, in Section 3 of Article 11, this section explicitly mentions legislation relating to this article shall be reviewed and reformed on the basis of specific and technological knowledge. These are the content of Article 11. But besides the Article 11, we have several general recommendations. As the Article 11, Section 3 refers to the possible review and reform of the article, the CEDAW committee constantly review the CEDAW Convention, which was adopted more than 40 years, and adopt general recommendations, which are the committee's updated interpretation of the CEDAW Convention. Those general recommendations which relate with employment issues are as follows. Among 39 general recommendations which the committee adopted, general recommendation number 5 and 25 on temporary special measures. These are the general recommendations which somehow related with the employment issues. So we have general recommendation number 5 and 25 on temporary special measures, and number 12, 19th, and 35 on gender-based violence against women, and number 13 on equal remuneration for work of equal value, number 16 on unpaid women workers, number 17 on unremunerated domestic activities, number 18 on disabled women, and number 21 and 29 on the marriage and the family relations, and number 26, women migrant workers, and number 27 on older women. The CEDAW Convention is such an evolving and living instrument. Therefore, besides the CEDAW Convention itself, more detailed, Article 11, besides Article 11, please read these general recommendations with regard to the employment issues for women. Besides the general recommendation, several international labor organizations, ILO's conventions related to equality of women in the area of employment are also important. Those are ILO Convention number 100 on equal remuneration, and Convention number 111 on discrimination with regard to employment and occupation, and ILO Convention number 183 on maternity protection convention. I heard from Alicia that Bahama is now considering to ratification ratify this convention near future. And ILO Convention number 189 on domestic workers. And finally, Convention number 190 on violence and harassment. Again, I heard from Alicia that the Bahamas ratified this convention, so congratulations. So these ILO conventions are also related with women's and girls' rights with regard to employment. So please read, if you have any chance, please read these conventions too. Now, why gender equality in employment is important? Gender equality in employment is not only socially just, but it also has other benefits. For example, I can put 3 examples. First, women's economic empowerment is central to realizing women's rights and gender equality. Women's economic empowerment includes women's ability to participate equally in existing markets, their access to and control over productive resources, access to decent work, control over their own time, lives, and bodies, and increased voice, agency, and meaningful participation in economic decision-making at all levels, from the household to international institutions. Secondly, when more women work, economies grow. Women's economic empowerment boosts productivity, increases economic diversification, and income equality, in addition to other positive development outcomes. For example, increasing female employment rate in OECD countries to match that of Sweden could boost GDP by over 6 trillion US dollars, recognizing, however, that growth does not automatically lead to a reduction in gender-based inequality. Conversely, it is estimated that gender gaps cost the economy some 15% of GDP. Thirdly, women's economic equality is good for business. Companies greatly benefit from increasing employment and the leadership opportunities for women, which is shown to increase organizational effectiveness and growth. It is estimated that companies with 3 or more women in senior management functions score higher in all dimensions of organizational performance. So these examples clearly show that gender equality in employment is very much important, not only for women, but for economy and for everyone. Now, talking about the issues relating to the Article 11 in the CEDAW's concluding observations, the issues I listed, several issues which were written in the CEDAW concluding observations, which relate with the equal rights for women with regard to the employment. Those are equal remuneration for equal work, inaccessibility of certain jobs for women, unemployment among women, concentration of women in informal, low or unpaid jobs, disadvantaged groups of women, sexual violence and harassment in the workplace, and discrimination with regard to pregnancy, birth, maternity, and marriage. These are the issues under Article 11, which are written in the many concluding observations adopted by the CEDAW committee. Now, let's see the current situation in the Bahamas. This is the Global Gender Gap Report 2021, published by the World Economic Forum. Unfortunately, the data in 2022 was not available. Therefore, I took a 2021 report. According to this report, the Bahamas ranked 58th among 146 countries. This is very good, I should say, comparing with Japan, which ranked at 120th. 120th. You are 58th. So your country is much better, much gender equal than Japan. So I envy you. The Global Gender Gap Index benchmarks the current state of gender parity across 4 key dimensions: economic participation and opportunity, educational attainment, health and survival, and political empowerment. Scores are on the 0 or 1 scale, where 1 represents the parity, gender equal. The Bahamas Gender Gap Index in 2021 was 0.725, average 0.725, which is closer to 1, gender parity. Japan's score index was 0.6 something, so Japan is much worse than Bahamas. While the score of educational attainment was 1, which means parity, gender equal in the Bahamas, but the score of economic participation and opportunities was 0.856. Not 1, but this score is above the global average score. So Bahama is not that bad, much better than Japan, I should repeat. And today I'm talking about economic issues, but please see the political participation. The Bahamas index is 0.064. This is very low, but similar with Japan. Japan is also Japan ranked 136 with regard to political participation, but for both Japan and Bahamas, the low score in the politics is very serious problem. I think this is one of the root causes for gender gap, because it is generally said that gender discrimination deeply rooted in the social structure, traditions or cultures or people's way of thinking, unconscious bias. So we do need a quite clear and concrete policies and legislation to change the society. We need a very specific policy and legislation. But if we don't have enough women in the political field, it is difficult to develop a gender-sensitive law or policy. So the low score in the politics is some problematic thing, both for the Bahamas and Japan. Looking into the sub-indexes, the score of legislators, senior officials, and the managers, mainly managers in economic fields, and professional and technical workers were 1. Score was 1, that is parity. But the score of estimated earned income was 0.66. So from these figures, we can understand that the Bahamas has gender pay gap. Although economic score is not that bad, gender pay with regard to payment, earned income, the score is low. So the Bahamas must have a gender pay gap, I think. And this is a Sustainable Development Report, SDGs Report 2022. Please look at SDGs dashboard and trends below. The SDG Goal 5, gender equality, is colored yellow, which means the SDG Goal 5, gender equality, remains challenge for the Bahamas. And the trend is moderate. Its progress is moderate, yellow arrow. And if we also see the Goal 8, decent work and economic growth, Goal 8 was colored red. That means the major challenges for the Bahamas, and its progress also moderate, yellow arrow. From these pictures, we can understand that G5, Goal 5, gender equality, and Goal 8, decent work, are both challenges for the Bahamas. And if you see the right up right corner, unfortunately, there was no information on average performance by SDGs. And this slide also shows that the Bahamas has insufficient data, and the statistical performance index, the score is 50.1. So this SDGs report revealed that the Bahamas lack of data. And I think continuous data collection and analysis are very important and required, because it is necessary to understand the current status of the gender gap, to identify the priority policy deficit for economic empowerment of women, to develop new policies, to measure and analyze the effect of the introduced policies, and to improve policies that are not effective. So we have to know the baseline. In order for us to know the baseline, we need the data, and we have to identify the area which we don't have any policies or legislation, and then fill out that hole. And then we have to evaluate the impact of the new policy or legislation. So anyway, we have to collect data. Data collection is very important. So I think the Bahamas to think about to improve the data collection. That is another challenge for the Bahamas, I think. Excuse me. And this is the World Bank's Women, Business and the Law 2022 report. This report evaluated the current state of the gender gap in 190 countries. This table captures legal differences between men and women, including labor. The degree of legal protection women receive is indexed for each country, with the rights available to men set at 100. In the Bahamas, there was no gender gap in the legal system in the 4 areas of mobility, 100, women and men are equal, and the workplace, 100, there is no gender gap, and assets and pension, there is no gender gap for these 4 areas. But on the other hand, women benefited only 75% comparing with men in pay. So there is a pay gap. And entrepreneurship, 75% again, and only 20% for parenthood. So this table clearly shows the challenges for the Bahamas with regard to legislation. From this table, we can understand that the Bahamas lack of legislation on equal parenthood and pay. Now, this is the situation in 21 and 22. But going back to the our dialogue in 2018, let's see the last concluding observations which the CEDAW committee adopted in 2018 after the constructive dialogue with the Bahamas. The committee recommended the Bahamas to enact appropriate legislation that guaranteed the principle of equal pay for equal value, equal pay for work of equal value, and amend provisions relating to entitlement to maternity leave. This recommendation is in line with the figures which the World Bank report showed, I think. The committee also recommended the Bahamas to create an enabling environment for women to become economically independent, to ensure that women doing unpaid work are eligible for retirement and other work-related benefits, to ensure the effective enforcement of the legal provisions protecting against sexual harassment and violence against women in the workplace, to adopt temporary special measures to increase the participation of women with disabilities, and to adopt a strategy for the protection of domestic workers. These are the recommendations made by the committee. So in sum up, from the concluding observations in 2018, we can understand that the main issues on employment in Bahamas consist of a lack of equal pay for work of equal value, and lack of entitlement to maternity leave, lack of economic independence of women, lack of promotion of entry of women into formal economy, lack of work-related benefits for unpaid work, and protection against sexual harassment and violence in the workplace, participation of women with disabilities in labor market, and protection of domestic workers. These are, I think, the main issues for Bahamas on employment. So I hope these main issues on employment will be adequately addressed, and the fact or substantive equality between men and women on employment in the Bahamas will be attained. I added some references which I referred during my presentation here. So if you are interested, please consult these references. Thank you very much for your listening. I stop here, and please give your comments or questions now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hiroko, for a very comprehensive and quite concise, I think, presentation on Article 11 on employment. This has been really helpful for me, and I'm sure for other people as well. For those joining the session, please feel free to put your questions, comments, challenges, and ideas in the chat. If you would like to unmute to share your contribution, feel free to just use the raise your hand icon. That's just so that we can avoid any crosstalk with people trying to talk at the same time. Hiroko, I have quite a number of questions about this. And as I was telling you earlier, Equality Bahamas is going to be doing some more work in this space, particularly around maternity leave. But my first question is about the reference to General Recommendation 5 on temporary special measures. Could you tell us how that's relevant to employment? Because I couldn't come up with any ideas of how that would be used in this thematic area.
Yeah, thank you very much. You're talking about the employment issue in general, not the maternity issues.
Yes, in general.
Okay, thank you very much. In the employment issues, I think we can use the temporary special measures, especially for the women in the managerial levels. Internationally aimed target is 30%, right? Both for political and economic field. But talking about the situation in Japan, we have about 10% of women on the managerial level in the political field also. So in order to attain the internationally targeted 30%, we do need to introduce temporary special measures like a quota system. That is the temporary special measures which I'm talking about. Thank you very much for your question.
Thank you for that. I was also wondering about General Recommendation 17 on unremunerated domestic activities, and just wondering what that looks like in practice. How do we work on that? Because we know that there are so many women who are doing unpaid labor, and I know that connects to one of the concluding observations on ensuring that women who are engaged in unpaid labor can access work-related benefits and retirement. What does that look like?
Well, that's very difficult question to answer. Actually, not so many countries has a specific data on the figures of women involved in the unpaid work, or so it is very difficult. But just people estimate the numbers. But we have to take into consideration of those working hours, and then calculate the salary for them. And based on that estimate, we have to calculate the pensions or, social benefit for them. So we do need to establish that mechanisms. I don't know how, but theoretically we have to do that, I think.
And this is also connected to creating that enabling environment, as the concluding observations say, for women to be economically independent, because there are so many who are, housewives,
yes,
or people who might be engaged in informal labor, but doing quite a lot of domestic and care work. where would you say that that remuneration would come from? Would that come from the partner in the household, other people who could be taking responsibility for the people who are being cared for by women, or would this be provided by government, like through social services? Do you have ideas about where that money
Well,
would come from?
yeah, it's again very difficult, but I guess the first step is, I think, husband and wives have to share their, household things and the care work together, child care and elderly care work together. So in order to do that, we have to establish more flexible working method and work the way to work. In Japan, this situation is similar. Women stay home, and then that's why men can work until very late. Therefore, men does not do anything about household things, and then care work. So we have to change that kind of working modality, and then share the work. And that is one thing. And then if the woman can, the husband and the wife can share the work, woman has the time to go outside and then work and then earn money. So that is first step. But from that, I don't know exactly. Maybe Marion raised the hand.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I think you've begun to answer, respond to the question that Alicia has posed in the way that you have, and I think that is adequate too. I think where women also fill in the gap where the government ought to be doing the work in terms of social services, in terms of elderly care, child care, care for children, preschool, etc. These are government responsibilities, and so I think that where women fill those gaps in for the government's responsibility, women ought to be paid by the government for doing this work. This is really our own taxpayers' money that is used in any case. And so I think we as citizens really need to create the kind of furor and action the government to do what it is supposed to do. So that is, women are to be paid for the child care and the elderly care and all of the sick care that we do, in addition to the work that we do, the paid work that we do, etc. So it really is, in my mind, part of the response is the government remuneration of women. And this also should inure to women's benefit in terms of pensions, so this is work that we do, and it ought to be calculated in the GDP, and it ought to be remunerated on a day-to-day basis, and it ought to be part of our pension care post-retirement. So I want to land this squarely in the jurisdiction of the government, but we as citizens must make this happen. It's not going to happen just like that.
Yeah, and it's connected to the gender ideology, what we believe men should do and women should do, and that these are very separate tasks, and that men are supposed to be formally employed in the productive economy, and women stay in the reproductive space. And this is something that we want to really disrupt, and that's why Equality Bahamas is focusing on maternity leave in the coming months. So for those who haven't heard yet, we are looking at not just the length of maternity leave, understanding that it's not enough. It's not long enough for people who are trying to heal and recover from childbirth, but also caring for a brand new human being, mostly on their own, but also looking at parental leave and ensuring that we create an understanding of and a value for both parents being involved in this care and domestic work. And when we have laws that say that women get maternity leave and men get no leave unless they use their 5 days of family leave that's unpaid, we set up a dynamic where we're reinforcing the idea of this gender division of labor, and that men are not responsible for the work that takes place in the home and within the family. So we're looking at that, and we'll be doing some research in the coming months. For those who have had children in the last 5 years or so, please get in touch if you'd like to be a part of our research. But back to you, Hiroko, do you have thoughts, or does the committee have thoughts about what leave looks like? Are there conversations about parental leave and not just leave for the birthing parent?
Yes, yes. We are talking about, usually make a recommendation with regard to parental leave to yes. And then you rightly refers to the so-called gender stereotype, the way of people thinking. Women tend to think they should stay home and take care of children. That's why we do need some laws with sanctions saying that fathers also has to take leave to take care of their children, and those leave has to be paid. Otherwise, people will not take leave. So we are recommending not only maternity leave, but paternity leave also, paid paternity leave. Yes, that is very good, important point. Thank you very much.
Thank you too. Those joining us, do you have any questions or comments? We do have some time here. We have about 19 minutes left. So you do have some time to think and, just consider what you might want to share. I can definitely take us through the whole time, but this is a space for you to be able to share your ideas and ask questions that you have about the convention as well. So do think about any contributions that you'd like to make. I'm also thinking a lot about, throughout this whole series, really, the whole series of discussions on the convention, I've been thinking a lot about lack of data. And this is something that I feel has really plagued us as an NGO, across civil society, as a country, is that we just do not have the data. And in many cases, the data is there, but we don't have access to it, or it hasn't been analyzed, it hasn't been publicized. Do you have thoughts about what we do about this complete lack of data, or the gap in access? Are you a proponent of, really pushing the government to share its data, and or for NGOs to collect this data ourselves, understanding that most of us are pretty under-resourced? What do we do in the short term? Because of course the long game is to ensure that we change the systems and ensure that data is collected and analyzed and shared. But in the short term, as we work on these issues and we really have a set of goals to reach, what do you think?
Well, I think whenever I ask the government, both central and local government, they say that they have some kind of data, but they seldom disclose those data to outside of the government, or even among different local government, they never share the data. So I think we do need to let them disclose, give the data to other people so that everybody knows the situation. And some place they don't have any data, so they have to start data collection. But the most cases they have some kind of data, so we do need to share and show it to other, and then know the situation. And the other issue these days with regard to data is how to collect the data. Usually, so far, government collect only the data, either men or women, only two of them. But nowadays, of course, there are other people based on their own sexual orientation. So, they are both sides. Because we don't want to gender discrimination, we don't want to ask their sexual orientation, either man or woman. Or in order to identify the minority people, we have to ask their own identity. Is it okay or not? Those questions are raised by some government institutions. But I will say that it's leave it to the people. If they say, I'm woman, it's okay, woman. And if she said that, no, I don't want to disclose my thinking, then it's okay, not identify or something like that. Maybe we need 5 or 4 selections. But anyway, we do need the data, so we better ask the collecting the data. I'm sorry, I can't explain correctly, but yes, Mariam, please.
No, I think you've explained it very well, Hiroko, as you know, responding to Alicia's question. And so at the broader level, yes, I do agree that the data collection it's central. I mean, government has to ground its own policies in data, and I find that is not always the case, or very rarely the case, actually. And same for NGOs. I mean, we need the data in order to persuasively argue for positions that we hold. The data helps, and so it's really important. And so when countries come before us, Hiroko, as you know, we have a whole question and recommendation section on data, and most countries, I mean, just do not provide the kind of data that we need, or that they even need. And so this is a recommendation that's consistently made. I think that in making a state party report, for example, if I look at the Bahamas, we found it very difficult to really give the kind of data that we needed for the Bahamas' report. And so it seems to me that there's no real centralization of data. Each ministry has its own data, and it doesn't seem to get to the point where it's collated in a way that helps us to understand what it means and what, you know, how it should be used. And so I think one of the recommendations that we make as a committee is some kind of data, you know, a strong data department that really knows how to use the numbers and analyze them and make them significant in the ways that helps to drive public policy, and also is open to NGOs having this, because that's the other piece to it. I mean, NGOs have to have the data in order to do the work that we do. So it's you know, this kind of secrecy around data is ridiculous. I mean, what is the point of it? You know, we need it. So it's a constant call for us as a committee to have the data available and also accessible to citizens.
Yeah. One of the areas that people are consistently asking for data is on the gender pay gap. And when it comes up, we get these global reports that I think the last one said it was a 30% gap. And a lot of people really kind of disagree with it and say, well, that's not true, or that's the case because you know, men are doing harder work, or men work more, or something that I heard recently is that, well, women leave to go have children, which is connected to a lot of other structural issues that we can delve into, right? It's not an excuse, it's another issue. But one of the things that's really interesting about data is when it exists, but it just isn't used to calculate some of the things that we need to be able to advocate for change. So in the case of the Bahamas, we don't necessarily have a measurement of people in management positions and how women and men are compensated differently for their work. That's not provided to us, but we know that it exists because everyone has to pay into national insurance, and that's based on your income. So that data is somewhere. It's living at the National Insurance Board, but it's not being used to make these calculations. Is this something that the CEDAW committee is taking note of? I know there's only so much that the committee itself can research on every single country for these sessions. Or is this something that needs to be raised very specifically by NGOs in shadow reports so that there can be a very explicit recommendation that the government use the data that exists at the National Insurance Board to facilitate NGOs and to provide information on the real gender gap, so that people have a better understanding of what it looks like for people at the same level within corporations?
Yeah, you usually ask the government to encourage the NGO or civil society participation with regard to CEDAW's review cycle. So that also covers the data collection or sharing the data between the government and NGOs also. So, and as a member of the CEDAW committee, whenever we make a research, the NGO data is very useful. So anyway, if you don't have any chance to share the data, but NGO yourself, data is very important. So please provide us the data. And then talking about the gender pay gap, in my country, Japan made a law saying that the companies which have more than 300 employees has to disclose the gender pay gap. The women's pay, the ratio of women's salary comparing with the men has to be disclosed in the paper, so that the students can see which company is have a more gender, equal policy and so forth. And then now the number is more than 300, but the government is going down, decrease the number of employees to more than 200 companies. So, but 200 employees means still bigger company. So it cannot bind and then middle class or small companies, but still disclosing a gender pay gap is one way to make a gender eliminate gender discrimination. And the other thing is that talking about the gender pay gap, I once saw the figures, usually people say that men earn many money because women are working part-time, involved in the only part-time job. But I think in Japan, the Cabinet Secretariat has a table showing that comparing with the men and women in the full-time employment and men and women in part-time employment, comparing with them. And in both full-time employment and part-time employment, men earns much more than women. Women are about 70% of earning of the comparing with the men's salary. So that means the thing is not full-time employment or part-time employment, but for both, men earns money because they are having a higher level, and or some gender stereotyping, women can earn less or something like that. So there are some thinking, but we do need very concrete data showing, showing the different things. So we have to be careful with the data, I think.
Definitely. And there is, speaking of this creating an enabling environment, we know that for many women, the workplace can be unsafe or feel uncomfortable. And I noted that the concluding observations include a recommendation for the government of the Bahamas to make amendments to the Sexual Offenses Act to protect women against sexual violence, harassment in the workplace. And I'm wondering, now that the Bahamas has ratified the ILO Convention 190 on eliminating violence and harassment in the world of work, is the CEDAW committee at the next review just going to check that box? Or is the government of the Bahamas going to be expected to domesticate that and still make the change to the Sexual Offenses Act?
Sorry, could you say that again?
So the Bahamas has ratified C-190.
Ratified, yes.
Is that enough, or are we still looking for to domesticate it and put it in the legislation in the country? Sexual
Okay, thank you. I understand the point. Well, it's depend on the legal system of your country. If your country can directly introduce, incorporate the international treaty into the domestic legal system, then you don't need to domesticate. You don't need any domestic law. But I don't know your legal system. But if you ratify one ILO convention, that is a good thing. So we commend that. And if it's required for you to domesticate international law into domestic law, then you have to do that. It's
Mhm.
depending on the legal system, I think.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Hiroko. And so yes, Alicia, the Bahamas would have to domesticate it.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
it would be, yes, because we it's not a direct implementation into our law. So it would be
Okay.
up to the NGOs now in the Bahamas, unfortunately or fortunately,
Mhm.
to make sure that that happens, because it will just remain a convention that we can tick the box to. And yes, the CEDAW committee would pursue that at the next a hearing before the committee. We would note that it's been ratified, but we would also ask about the domestication and
Okay.
the import of that and the result of it. Have there been any complaints under it, for example, and what has been the result of that? So we would pursue it. In other words, it wouldn't just be a tick box.
Mm.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your explanation. I didn't know that. But how can we find out which country has to domesticate, or which country can directly incorporate international law into domestic law?
Right. So when we do Articles 1 and 2,
Okay.
for the country, we know from that because we look at the Constitution, we look at the legislation under Articles 1 and 2 during the country reports, and we know from that whether it's automatically a part of the law or whether it's not. So the Bahamas has what's called a dualist system, and so it has to be domesticated. It's not automatic under our Constitution.
Yeah.
So whoever does Articles 1 and 2 would then know what kind of what is required and whether it's automatic or not.
Thank you very much. I learned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you both. Last call for folks that are with us live here on Zoom that have any questions, ideas, challenges that you'd like to raise. You can feel free to type them into the chat. If you'd like to speak, you can just raise your hand to indicate that you will unmute. And while you have your thoughts about that, I'll ask one more question about, Hiroko, in one of your slides, you said that when women work, economies grow. And we know that that is true. We know that there is a dollar value to the work that women do. And my question might be a little bit complicated. I think that in a lot of cases, when we are advocating for women's rights, there's a tendency to put a dollar value on not just women's work, but women ourselves, right? And we should do this for women because they do this for the economy. Do you have thoughts about how we sort of straddle this line where we are talking about the value, the contributions to the economy, but still maintaining that women are human beings and they have we have human rights regardless of our work? Do you have thoughts about how we
Yes. Thank you very much, raising a very important issue. I feel exactly the same what you are talking, because women's right, human right. So we have to start with talking about human rights. Women's rights as a human rights, that's one thing. But whenever we talk about employment issues or any relations with private companies, we are using the dollar because they think, they calculate in terms of the dollars. That's why. But it does not, how to say, forget about human rights. Women, and not only the rights, but I would like to use the words dignity, human dignity. We need a right and dignity as a woman. That is the beginning. But since we are talking about the relation with the private company, so we are talking about how we women can economically contribute. That's it. That is my way of thinking. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, I know we have to speak their language, right? And use what would move them.
Yes.
And I also think about how that could reinforce their ideas.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's something that's very complicated for me, and I have a hard time when we start talking about women in terms of dollars. It's difficult for me.
Yes. Alicia, Dana has her hand up too.
Yes,
Dana.
please go ahead, Donna.
I was wondering, because I've been hearing more and more about health-related issues in employment around me. So for instance, about menstruation, endometriosis, or menopause issues, and how this affects women's ability to work. And I was wondering, because I haven't seen much of this in the recent concluding observations, at least not for Article 11 on employment. So I was wondering if this is something that belongs to Article 11, or maybe you think it belongs more to other articles, or if you have any thoughts on how this issue could be incorporated, and if it even will, maybe there's a reason to not prioritize it, or just wondering what your thoughts are.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dana, and thank you for your work. I really appreciate your participation. Thank you very much for asking the very good question. Well, the issue, women's health issue, can be dealt in both under Article 11 for employment and the health issue as it is under Article 12. But talking about women's, how to say, talking about the menstruation, it affects women's capability in the workplace. So we can talk about health leave, the women's leave because of its health condition. We think we can think about it under 11 for the working woman. I think the company has to pay provide paid leave for women who are suffering from these health issues. That is now I'm thinking, but the issue is relatively new. So I never see, as you said, never see this issue in our concluding observations, but maybe some, you know, even in Japan, we are talking about this issue. So maybe we have to think about it in near future. Yeah. How do you think, Marian?
Yes, no, yeah, it's certainly new to me too that Don is bringing this up, and I can see the relevance, and I think we do need to think about how we could make it part of Article 11 and introduce it in a way that Dana is referring to it, because we haven't done that so far. Is my point?
No.
Right. But I just want to go. Thank you, Dana, for that. I want to go back to what Alicia was asking about. You know, the dollar value on women and what that feels like and looks like, and how it instrumentalizes who we are and how we are in a business economic context. But I think what I saw when you first started your presentation, Hiroko, was, you know, really, you landed the issue for me when you said it's a matter of social justice. And so I really feel strongly, and that's in your presentation. So where I understand Alicia's concerns, and I have that same concern too. And so the issue is about human rights. It is about social justice in terms of equal pay for work of equal value, etc., and all of the issues that are around it. And so putting a dollar value to it is problematic in many ways, because the minute the you know, we talk about women and our contribution to the economy, and then when the economy retracts, women are the first to, you know, to have to leave the business sector. So it is problematic. But I think the issue for me really is one about social justice and framing it in a human rights context. And yes, we do live in an economy, so we have to, you know, to see what how that best can facilitate women rather than the other way around. And yes, there are ways in which we must, you know, address the systemic and structural changes that need to be made, so that women's our own realities are borne out in a way that reflect human rights and social justice. So it's all that context that I keep wanting to repeat as we look at this as we look at women in the economic sphere, how does it come back to human rights? How does it come back or center itself around social justice for women? So it's complicated, but I think that's how I would want to talk about it always.
Thank you,
so
Marian.
much. Thank you. Well, we are a little bit over time, and I know it is so late for you, Hiroko. I'm so grateful
Yes.
to you for
No,
joining
no.
us at this late hour in Japan. I know it's past midnight. I
Past
really
midnight.
appreciate you coming and sharing with us. This has been really informative. And I really appreciate all of your thought and delving into the data on the Bahamas that you were able to find to really contextualize it for us. I think that's really important that we understand the practical applications of the convention. And you brought that across really, really clearly. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I don't know if you wanted to say anything else before we close.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. I could learn while I'm preparing this presentation. I could learn many, many things, and I could learn from your questions and Marian's answers. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And then I think I can sleep well tonight.
You've earned it, a really good sleep.
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much. And everybody, we have some dates for the next few sessions that you can take note of, and the registration will be up in the next couple of weeks as we confirm these dates. But right now we're looking at April 29th for Article 12 on health, May 20th for Article 14 on rural women, and June 24th for Article 13 on economic and social benefits. So I think all of these are going to be very, very interesting because we have some very particular circumstances in the Bahamas that we can ask the experts joining us to help us to think through as members of civil society, as residents of the Bahamas, and people all over the world that are trying to work with the convention a lot more and kind of integrate that into everyday advocacy and programming. Also, for those that are in Nassau, Bahamas, we have an event tomorrow. That's Sunday, March 26th. We will be at Poinciana Paper Press for an exhibition. We will be showing the signs that we used at the International Women's Day March and Expo a couple of weeks ago. We know, we had some really bold, really colorful signs. People really loved them. So now you can come and see them in the gallery space. You can purchase a sign if you want to. And we will also have, Sonia Farmer will set up the silk screen printing, so you can bring your own shirt or tote bag and get one of our very cool designs printed on your own material. And the cost for that is $15, or you can just come and have a look at the signs, take selfies and ussies with the signs. We'll be there again tomorrow, Sunday, from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. and it's free to drop by. We'll have some really nice treats for you to enjoy. So thank you everyone for joining us at this session. If you don't already, please follow Equality Bahamas on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. We're Equality Bahamas, or at Equality 242 in all of these spaces. Big, big thanks to Marian Bethel for helping us with organizing this entire series. It's been really incredible so far and is leading us to October, which is the 30th anniversary of the Bahamas ratifying the CEDAW Convention. So we think it's really important that we take some time to truly understand the convention and how we can make better use of it in the years to come. And big, big thanks also to Hiroko for joining us again at a very late hour and taking the time to do all of this research and present your thoughts to us. Thank you very, very much for joining us, everyone. And I look forward to seeing you at the next session, which is looking like April 29th, Article 12 on health. And we can probably delve into Donna's question a little bit more in that session as well. The recording will be up on our Facebook page immediately, and it will eventually be on YouTube as well. All right. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Marian. Thank you,
Thank you.
Alicia.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.